So you've received a take-home design exercise, and now you have between 2 to 3 days to figure out how to solve it so that you can receive the "Welcome to the next steps" email instead of "Thank you for your time and effort" email. And you're in the right place. I've been on both sides, solving it as a candidate and judging it as a hiring manager. And here are my top tips on how to approach it, pass it with flying colors, and make the team fall in love with you. First and the most important step is to ask questions to gain clarity about the brief. You need to set yourself up for success from the very beginning, and this will be a major contributing factor. Depending on the brief, you can ask questions about scope, about deliverables, about just things that are unclear to you. And sometimes, depending on the sophistication of the team, asking questions is actually expected of you. And if you were not to ask questions, there would be some minus points for you. On the opposite side of the sophistication spectrum, let's be honest, sometimes those documents are a little bit messy and low quality, the design briefs that they provide, especially if there is no dedicated design leader or the design team is small or young or they don't have experience recruiting. I've pointed out so many inconsistencies during the design recruitment process and even errors in those documents, so don't be afraid to approach it with the collaboration mindset. Don't put those documents on a pedestal. You can ask questions and you can have discussions. If it is your first time going through the design task exercise, let me help you a little bit with the types of questions I usually ask. The first area is research and data, and you should always ask about if there is an existing research to base your designs off of. Usually, if it's not mentioned in the brief, there is no research or they want you to do research, but you should always ask about this topic to just show your focus on data. There is also another case when they ask you directly to do research in the brief, or sometimes in a sneaky way, they would say something like, "Based on research, design this in this flow." It's good to specify what kind of research you're expected to do, what is the scope of the research, especially comparing to a very short time frame that you have for the task and not really having access to people usually who use the product or are potential users. So always have this discussion as well. And if there's anything available, you can use it. If they have certain expectations, you will know what those expectations are. Oh, one more thing. Sometimes by research in the brief, they mean just desk research, so browsing online, looking at competitors, or examining the product that they have. So your research would be to analyze the existing flow. The second area to ask about is the content of the brief itself. So if you don't understand certain expressions that are used, maybe some points are not really clear, or maybe you don't know what part of the product they are referring to exactly, it's always worth asking. Sometimes, especially if it's a brief that applies to an existing product that this team is working on, they may use some words or some shortcuts or name areas of the product in a specific way that is very clear to them but may not be clear to you. So you can always ask for clarification. Another area is the scope, so what they expect you to prepare as a result of this design exploration. It might be low fidelity or high fidelity designs, maybe some flows, etc. If it's not mentioned in the brief explicitly, you absolutely have to ask about it, because otherwise you're setting yourself up for failure regarding the deliverables. And sometimes, if it's not listed in the brief, they will come back to you with the question, what do you think should be the fidelity of the designs? Always come back with, let's do the low fidelity exploration because of the limited time frame. Because if they wanted you to prepare high fidelity, they would have explicitly asked for it in the brief from my experience. So always aim for low fidelity if you have an option, because it's less time consuming and also it's easier for you to prepare. And if they come back with, hey, prepare one screen in high fidelity as well, that's also fine, but at least you will have it very clear. And the last thing is technical limitations. Ask if there are any technical limitations that you should consider when preparing the design. Usually not, unless they are listed in the brief, but sometimes they come up with something, but at least you will show that you are experienced enough with working with developers to know that you should consider technical limitations in advance before coming up with a solution. Before moving on to the next point, I would like to share with you a really quick reflection regarding what is the key to success when it comes to the take-home design exercise. It is such a common question during my one-on-one coaching sessions. This is also why I'm recording this video as a coaching session highlight. I was only able to synthesize it when I moved to the other side of the conversation, so when I was interviewing candidates. And basically it boils down to being able to meet the design quality bar. So your solution needs to be relatively good and innovative. How you react to feedback, so you need to react positively. How you collaborate with the team, you need to show those collaboration skills, and that you can iterate on this design based on feedback that they provide. There is this common misconception that take-home design tasks are all about the solution that you provide. And let's be honest, it is not true, because we are in an artificial situation where we have a very short time frame for usually like a fake project or sometimes even for the fake product. So solution is not the only thing that really matters. It's one of the things, like 1/3, I would say, but all other soft skills that you can show regarding collaboration and iteration, how open you are and your personality, they matter just as much. Another tip is to don't go overtime. Timeframes for design exercise usually vary from 2 hours to 2 days. And the common temptation is that, if I have 4 hours for this exercise, I will spend 8 hours and it will just look so perfect and it will look like I'm an amazing designer. Might be true, but to the skilled eye, and come on, your designers will be judging your work, I can recognize that you've spent so much more time than it was prescribed in the design brief. It will be clearly visible. And actually, it is not a really good sign if you overdo it. So if someone has a 2-hour or 4-hour brief and they come back with a full high fidelity design of a whole application and multiple flows and all the edge cases, it is really a bad sign. It is a sign that they have not been following the instructions. So it means they are not very coachable. It will be very difficult to work with them. And also that they don't work really well, they don't respond well to limited scope. And this is a really bad sign, because in every project, basically, we have to limit the scope and you have to stay within those limitations so that you don't waste company's time, so your time that they are paying you for. And this is one of the things that is really like a red flag for me, because you don't understand the basics of working with the team and sticking to the requirements and being efficient with the projects and with the time. So during this exercise, we are checking for those 2 skills, so time management and being able to stick to the scope. So instead of going overtime, try to make the most out of the time that you're spending, fulfill the requirements, get the best high quality work. What I like to do is also to time box parts of the process. So for example, I want to do research for 1 hour, then design for 2 hours, then prepare the presentation for 1 hour, so that each part is equally developed. I'm not overdoing, for example, the design and then I don't have time for presentation. If you really want to spend a little bit more time, if you have, for example, 4 hours for the exercise, maybe go 4.5, maybe 5. Also, let's be honest, if you're spending those 4 hours on the exercise, are you thinking about some other things in the meantime? Are you watching YouTube? Are you just looking on stuff online on your phone? So account for that and maybe add this time that you've missed, but don't go crazy over time. This is like the summary of this advice. This next point is super important. Prepare an actual presentation with slides to show your solution. Following someone presenting something in Figma and just going between the pages and frames, it is really unpleasant, and also it doesn't look as professional as the presentation would look like. Presentation just makes everything feel really clean and organized, and people love organized designers. In briefs, sometimes there is a list of deliverables, and sometimes they say like Figma is enough. Even if they say that they want a Figma file, try to put your solution into frames, add some annotations, and just prepare like a walkthrough through the Figma, through your solution. A small pro tip from me is to have your slide templates ready in Figma before you even start an exercise. So when you know you're participating in a recruitment process, you can prepare those templates in advance, because probably the design task will be the part of the recruitment process. Just prepare some backgrounds, the color palette, how you write your name, the title of the slide, the title of the chapter, the page number, etc. And have it ready so that you don't have to think about it and waste time from your exercise to put the slides together. And there is a small thing that I do at the very beginning of the presentation, an intro slide, where I write my name, X, company, and then the title of the design task. This is a really small thing, but it sets the tone as a professional presentation and a professional task walkthrough. And for junior designers who are not really experienced in the corporate world, it is not really clear on how to set the presentation, how to set the tone. So just a small advice here. You may ask, why do I push for the presentation so much? And on top of that being tidy and easier to follow, there's also one more important thing. You are able to introduce context to your presentation that you wouldn't be able to show when presenting mockups only in Figma. And providing context works for your advantage. It allows you to explain the reasoning behind your decisions better. So even if people in the company who judge your task don't agree with the final solution that you provided or some decisions that you made, you still have a chance to show that there was a logical thinking behind it and basically save your task from being rejected. Also, showing your thinking and your process may add to your maturity score. Maybe you took an extra step, or maybe you came to interesting conclusions when creating this design, and it is not obvious from mockups only. People can't read your mind. It's better to just explain, tell your story, and grab those points that you can get. Now let's quickly talk about how to prepare your presentation in an optimal way. So the first thing to do is to be concise. Don't overwhelm with walls of text. Use bullet points and really short descriptions. Be really careful about how much content there is on your slides, not to overwhelm the team and not to provide too much information. Your your role is also to distill information for them so it's easier to follow and easier to understand. The next thing is to annotate your design. So basically point to some parts of the design and add some descriptions so it's more contextual. Basically go with show, don't tell approach. They don't know you, they don't know your design style, they don't know you as a designer, so leave no room for assumptions and misunderstandings. Another practical tip from me is that I like to plan out my slides as I plan work for the project. So if I have those 4 hours or 6 hours to do the design exercise, I plan out the presentation at the very beginning when I'm planning out what type of activities I'm going to do. Of course, it's going to change a little bit as I progress and discover things, but the frame will be there. So for example, on the first slide, I want to talk about the problems and the goals. Then I want to go through the current flow, or maybe analyze some competitors and go through designs and maybe some interesting UI elements that I already know about. It helps me set up my time more reasonably and follow this frame, and also it makes the presentation more well-rounded if I think about it from the very beginning. You start to think about the project with this presentation in mind instead of just free exploration of the designs. And the last thing is to adjust the presentation based on how it will be presented, how it will be viewed. So sometimes they ask you to just send the presentation in advance, and then you will add a little bit more text, a little bit more context, more mockups, because you will not be there to present it. Or sometimes they just ask you to come to the meeting and show your presentation and then present it and walk them through it. So here you can limit the number of things that are on the slides because you will be there to present. And there is one more thing. So if they ask for materials only to be sent to them and they allow for some freedom, it depends on the company, you can also record a video walkthrough using Loom, for example, where you present and you're just explaining things. It's easier to consume for some people, and I got a really good feedback when I did it because it feels more personal. They have a chance to get to know you even though you're not there. This next tip will allow you to stand out from the crowd of designers that they are interviewing. Go beyond the design solution. And I'm not asking you to do anything crazy here, just add a little bit of the product context and metrics at the end. At the beginning of the presentation, state the goals that there are for the project and elaborate on how we know that this is a problem we need to solve. Basically, elaborate on the brief. The next thing to do is to include research, either existing one or the one that you did or the one that you would do. So for example, as a next step, I would do usability testing of those designs. Usually also analyzing the current flow is a part of the research that you need to do, so include that as well. At the end of your presentation, you can add the next steps section where you list things that you will do after submitting this first version of the design. So for example, usability testing that we've mentioned before. You would talk to a specific type of user to validate some ideas that you had or some assumptions that you made. Maybe you would work with engineers to make sure that a certain controversial or difficult design solution could be implemented. So it shows your thinking beyond the design exploration only. And a super important point, metrics. Make sure that you include information about which metrics you're trying to improve by this project. It should come out of brief, maybe not directly, but you can conclude. So for example, is the success rate a problem? Is retention the problem? Maybe monthly active users could be improved because of this project. Think about it and add it to your presentation, and also add a section about measuring the success. So what metrics you would measure to make sure that this design is successful. You can add it also at the end of the presentation. I also like showing the before and after screens. So the before solution, what's implemented if it's an existing project, and the after solution, so how I improved it. It really works like a charm because people can see side by side what improvements you've made, and they can visualize how big of a difference it is. And the last thing that I would like to share with you, what really worked well for the latest design exercise that I did, is having a theme or a catchphrase for your presentation. So let me explain. The task was about the onboarding. I had to analyze the onboarding flow and propose changes to it. And I've noticed that they focus on showing people videos, but not really asking people to take action. So they explained in the video how to use the product, and then you were left alone. So I've decided to name the theme of the presentation, what I worked on, to, instead of show me how to do it with me. And I proposed some interactive elements and guided tours to improve the onboarding. And they absolutely loved it because it really summarized the essence of the work that I was proposing. Of course, you can't do it for every single project because it has to come naturally, but it's something to think about because some of the projects you can do it and it will really up your score when it comes to presentation and communication. This next tip is a really quick one. Use digital low fidelity sketches instead of actual hand-drawn sketches. Photographing and putting your hand-drawn sketches in a presentation is just not it. It's really messy and it looks unprofessional. Instead, I would use an application to express your low-fidelity designs. For example, I like using Excalidraw. It's free, I will link it in the description, but you can use any tool you want that provides those low-fidelity mockups. It's just easier to understand, it's easier on the eye, and it doesn't look as messy as the hand-drawn sketches and just looks more aesthetically pleasing. A practical tip on how to export from Excalidraw to Figma or to your presentation. So you need to select all of the elements and right-click and go to Copy to PNG. I recommend copying to PNG, not to SVG, because in SVG, the fonts don't really translate that well. So PNG is the way to go, at least for now. And also remember to start creating your designs in Excalidraw in the right size from the very beginning so that they are high enough quality. You can look at the box on the right to see the values of the height and width, and you can compare it with your Figma designs, so more or less they are the size of the phone or the size of the screen that you want to design for. Okay, moving on to presenting your solution live during the call with the team. And my best advice is defend your design, but not too much. And it is a common mistake that I used to make and many designers make. They treat this call as a battle to just show that your design is perfect, to defend it, to just make sure that no suggestion can be made and it cannot be questioned in any way. And this is absolutely not the way to go. Of course, you need to explain your reasoning, how you came to certain conclusions, but at the same time, stay collaborative. That was a difficult word. Stay collaborative and be open to suggestions. This needs to mimic an actual call that you would have with your team, where you all work together to find the best solution. It is not about defending your work. And this kind of approach would give you so many more points than just being really stuck in your ways and defending your design, because this is not the way that the team will work in the future. And it's about adjusting and taking into consideration other people's feedback and opinions. It is completely okay to say things like, oh, it is an interesting perspective. I would definitely explore it for the second iteration. Or, I didn't think about it this way. Thank you for sharing that. That would be definitely something worth exploring in the future iteration, or even in this iteration, we can do it right now. But also, don't beat yourself up. Don't say things like, oh my God, I'm so dumb. I didn't know about it, blah, blah, blah. Just be kind, be respectful, be inclusive, but also respect yourself in this conversation. There is a balance to it. So once it happened to me early in my career when I was eliminated from the recruitment process after the design exercise, because exactly I was too stuck in my ways. I was defending the design too much And they actually shared this feedback with me because I asked like, what happened? Was my solution not up to the standard? And they were like, no, the solution was great, but you were defending it too much, and every single suggestion that we made was just rejected, and it will be really hard for us to collaborate with you. And I was like, oh, that stung a lot, but lesson learned. Moving on from that point, I never had a situation like this, and I wasn't rejected after the take-home exercise anymore. So I think it was a really valuable lesson that at the end of the day, it's about showing your design skills, but also collaboration and how you accept and receive feedback. And the final advice, which is quite personal to me, read the brief once again before submitting the exercise to make sure that you covered absolutely everything. It has been my issue since I was a kid, and before every single test, my mom was telling me, read the instructions carefully and read them once again before submitting, because I had a tendency to read the instructions, do 50% of it and just go with it. I don't know where it was coming from, but since I had to really learn this behavior. I of course improved since, but I can't tell you how many times I almost skipped some points in the design brief, and reading it again saved me probably from not getting a job or not passing to the next step. So read the brief again. This 2 minutes or 1 minute will really save your life. Before we close, here is my semi-controversial hot take about take-home design exercises. I don't really like them. I think they are too vague, they're too time-consuming, and they are not optimal for getting to know someone. Instead, I would do a sync design session. So basically a session which is like around 2 hours where you collaborate on a brief with the team. So there is a candidate and there are, for example, 2 or 3 people from the team. One is an engineer, a product manager, and this hiring manager. And we can play different roles, so we can respond to questions about research and, collaborate as if we were in an actual team. And I think this is way more optimal for the recruitment process. It is less time consuming because as a candidate, you will spend those 2 hours during the call and that's it. You don't get the brief before, you don't need to do anything after. And it is more optimal because, let's be honest, when you get the design exercise, you think about it way more. So within the span of 2 days, you might spend 6 hours working on it, but you will spend so many more hours just thinking about it or having it in the back of your head. It also mimics the actual work environment better with this open discussion and collaboration, and it lets those 2 parties get to know each other better. So the candidate can see if there are maybe some weird forces in the team or some status quo, and the team can see if the candidate has a good communication style, and in general if those 2 collaboration styles mesh together. A really important thing, you can consult the solution as you go. So when you have a take-home exercise, when you go in the wrong direction, you're on this highway in the wrong direction for 4, 8 hours, however long it takes you to do the exercise. If you're on a call, you can quickly check with the team if this is the direction we're going, this is what you meant, maybe there is some error or misunderstanding, and pivot in the right direction quickly. So it's also better for you as a candidate. Expectations for the UI are also lower in this situation, and you don't have to focus on just pushing pixels that much. Even if you work in low fidelity for the take-home task, you would focus on presentation and how to write things, and it will take a lot of time. Here, the focus is more on collaboration, on discussing things. It is a little bit more high level. And another thing is that for the hiring manager, there is no possibility for the candidate to cheat in any way. They cannot watch any videos, no one can help them. There's just their brain and the task. The only downside is that it potentially can be stressful for the candidates. And I completely understand it, and I think that everyone who recruits understands it. But at the same time, as a designer, you need to lead workshops, lead meetings, be able to present your works. I think it shouldn't be that bad, that stressful. It's just a factor to think about. And that's all for the design exercise tips. If you would like me to record a full walkthrough through an actual design exercise, how I would solve it, how I would approach it, just a case study, let me know in the comments. In the meantime, if you would like to hang out a little bit more, here are 2 videos that I recommend that you watch. Thank you so much for today, and I'll see you soon.